Hi everyone, welcome to the Consumer as Individual. Today we're going to look at consumer needs and motivation. So our lecture objectives today: to understand the types of human needs and motives and the meaning of goals, to look at the dynamics of the relationship between needs, setting of goals, interrelationships between needs and goals, different types of needs and motivational approaches developed by researchers, how human motives are studied and then measured. Motivation is defined as the following here, and it's often seen as a driving force that impels individuals into action. So motivation is, if you want to think about it, is the classic fight or flight syndrome in many animals, and we're animals as well. So there is this. So really, it's a driving force. It's produced by a state of tension that. So if we're thirsty, we seek water. If we're cold, we seek shelter. And so this is often a very powerful way of influencing behaviour in consumer behaviour and marketing. And this is really shown by this advertisement for Guinness beer from a few years ago.
The rhythm of life is a powerful beat. Puts a tingle in your fingers and a tingle in your feet. Rhythm in your bedroom, rhythm in the street. Yes, the rhythm of life is a powerful beat. And the rhythm of life is a powerful beat. Puts a tingle in your fingers and a tingle in your feet. Rhythm in your bedroom, rhythm in the street. Yes, the rhythm of life is a powerful beat. Flip your wings and fly to your daddy. Take a dive and swim to your daddy. Hit the floor and rock his daddy.
So what this advertisement is it's compelling you to drive towards the object, which is to drink the Guinness, and Guinness is being linked to motivational state. And as we'll see later, we can arouse motives by thinking about it, emotional, or changing the environment. So they fulfill the following roles, and this is why it's of interest to us. Basically, it shows a direction in behaviour. If you're thirsty, you'll seek water. If you're hungry, you'll seek food. If you're lonely, you'll seek company. So these are very important areas of behaviour and therefore consumer behaviour for us to study. Objects can be associated with motivation. So, for example, we may use a mobile phone or a cell phone to communicate with loved ones. We may use the internet to find out interesting information, or we might use it just to pass on a joke, so humour. And so goal-oriented objects are important here as well. As we'll see, choice criteria, so if you're concerned about the safety of your family, that might influence the type of car you might buy, or if you're interested in how well your children are going, that might influence the kind of school you want, so sort of a self-actualization need. And so influences choices that we make. It can also direct other influences. As we'll see, motivation directs perception, it directs attention, it directs how we make decisions. Now, there are various types of motives that you should be aware of. The first is pretty basic, but we also have physiological motives, and physiological motives are really are our basic motives, such as hunger, thirst, companionship to a certain extent. Psychogenic motives are more mental motives, and these might be motivation for novelty, motivation for interest, motivation for feeling spiritually enlightened. Controversial area of motives is whether these are conscious or unconscious. Now, when we look at personality in next week, we'll see that there is this tension between early researchers that there are, or it's believed that there are parts of our personality and therefore our motives which are unconscious. Now, by that we mean that we're not consciously thinking about them. That is, we're not really paying them attention, but nevertheless they do influence behaviour. For these reasons, because some motives are seen as unconscious, some researchers, and we'll have a look at people like Ernst, believe that this is a very powerful form of consumer behaviour. Motives can be positive or negative, so they can be we can be drawn towards drinking a pint of Guinness, or we can avoid a negative outcome such as the Grim Reaper campaign from a few years ago, which is mentioned in your textbook, and because we don't avoid a negative outcome, take precautions against catching HIV/AIDS. So both positive and negative approaches to motives, and therefore we'll look at this later on, learning can be used. Have a look at this Guinness advertisement here and try and work out what kind of motives are being used.
If you keep an open mind, you'll discover dark secrets. Have you been here long?
Okay, so really there are a range of both conscious and unconscious. The dreamlike state of these motives are shown here as well. Clearly there are physiological motives in consuming the product, but there's also an important psychogenic or social motive, the idea of connecting with other people with beer, and what we might call a motive of exploration. So all these factors are then linked to the object, in this case the brand of Guinness, and the idea being this kind of compels us more towards being attracted towards this object and therefore purchasing a Guinness. Some important issues then, or parts of definitions, or I guess terminology of motives that you should be aware of. We'll have a look at this a few ways. Basically, motives form a very important part of learning, and so motive. Obviously, if you're motivated, you learn, and hopefully you are in this subject. And so this is what we mean to acquire knowledge and experience that apply to future purchase decisions. Now, when motives and needs are not met, we think this creates, or the researchers believe, this creates a feeling of tension, a feeling that a need needs to be satisfied, being unfulfilled as well is part of that. Importantly, motives often are influenced or linked to what we call a drive, and this is really this idea that a force compels you, and this is and it can be a psychological or it could be a physical force into action designed to satisfy a need. So if you think about when your child has run across the road and you've instantly run after that child to protect that child, that's what we call a drive. Now, thinking process or cognitive processes, which we'll talk about from, particularly now that we're looking at consumers as individuals, also form part of motives as well. So thinking about things can force us to be motivated, and as much as just having something that works on a more basic level as a need. So needs really do drive motivation. So every individual has what we believe is a set of needs, and needs underline all human actions. Basic needs: food, shelter, water, and I guess companionship. A need becomes a motive when it is aroused to a sufficient level of intensity. So you feel hungry, you feel thirsty, you feel safety, or you feel a very strong need for companionship. So you might feel that if you're upset, or you might feel that if you're alone. You might feel the need for shelter to be more important if you were moving house or moving to a new city. There are two types of needs, which we call innate or biogenic. So these are needs that your pets or animals might have: food, water, and shelter. Then we have needs that we learn from our culture, which we've looked at. And what is suggested here is that prestige, affection, needs for learning or discovering new types of information are also another type of need that people are related to. Research that I've done on mobile phones from a few years ago suggested when we asked many consumers about their mobile phones or cell phones, that often that they felt that that was a need. What about goals then? Now, goals are sought after the result of what we desire motivational behaviour. And it's believed that a vast majority of our behaviour is goal-oriented towards some outcome. For us, Consumers have specific goals. That is, branded products will be more successful or considered if they fulfill their needs. So my mobile phone fulfills a number of needs: communication, linking with my loved ones, work, play, and so on. So these are all goals that may be linked to a product and therefore needs. Needs and goals are interdependent. They do play off each other. As one set of needs is obviously met, then certain goals may therefore arise out of those needs. So we've got a basic need for transportation, but we've got very many different types of goals that we seek in that transportation. And part of that might be prestige, or it might be that we want the goal of comfort when we're driving, and so on. Here are some factors which influence goals. Obviously, our culture over here influences our goals and our norms. Our own experiences in life, so your goals will change when you have a family, or if you don't have a family, when you retire. Can we access our goals? So we might have a goal of being financially independent, but we may not be able to access that yet until we retire. Our physical capabilities will clearly influence our goals. I mean, I'd like to play in the AFL for the Fremantle Dockers, but clearly my physical capabilities don't meet that. So how do I access that goal? Well, I do that by supporting my football team. How then are motives aroused? Well, your physiological condition, being tired, hungry, thirsty, concerned about terrorist attacks, will influence your goals. Thinking about food, or thinking about loved ones, thinking about improving your life, thinking about a holiday will also arouse goals. Situational conditions, so being in a particular store, being on holidays, can also arouse goals. The property of the stimulus itself, so as we've seen with some of the advertisements previously, if they're designed in a very emotive way, or they get us to think about what we're doing, so marketers have a key role here in the stimulus is just any sort of information you receive, and that can help remind people or trigger a goal. Now on this slide there are a number of links, if you download this here, which will show you how some of these triggers are used in marketing approaches. So I won't go through this, mainly because I don't want to give you too much of a lecture to look at, but if you download this lecture you can certainly click on some of these links here and you can see some of the various ways. So for example, the environmental factor over here uses the Coles MasterChef as a goal. The physiological is Gatorade. Cognitive, I'm trying to think now. Cognitive is thinking about the brand. So, for example, Samsung, people lining up for an Apple phone and the advantages of the Samsung. And emotional is the idea, this rather humorous one, of cleaning and how horrible cleaning is. And so this is really a negative goal, and so the product helps. Anything that can help you avoid that frustration, therefore becomes more motivating to you. So as I said, there can be positive or negative motivation. So you may, in this subject, want to get a really high distinction, and that's an approach object, or you may not want to fail, and we call that a negative goal or an avoidance object. So that's really shown in the Nike motivation example here, so just click on this link here to do that, whereas a consumer may join a gym to stop getting fat or to avoid a serious heart condition. So we can really see that there are both positive and negative types of motivations that can be used. Often we see negative motivation being used in public safety and or what we call public service announcement type campaigns or social marketing. Now, our needs and goals are never really what we call stay still, they're dynamic. Your total needs, that of food, shelter, are never totally satisfied because you can have a better house or a different type of house. As you satisfy one set of needs, so you might satisfy your financial needs, then new needs that might emerge. So, for example, it might be the need to go on a holiday or a need to relax. Your success and failure influences goals. So, for example, if you fail to become a CEO at the age of 30, you might change your goals maybe to more artistic pursuits or towards something else. Substitute goals may therefore be pursued. So you can see why goal theory is so important in consumer behaviour, since it directs our basic directions. Now, an important part of goals are frustration. So when consumers fail to meet a goal, this often may result in feelings of frustration for them. People may then redefine the frustrating situation in order to protect their self-image. So what we'll see throughout the subject is that consumers tend to try and protect their beliefs, their views of themselves, by altering the situation around them. There's a nice example here, which is the Indian advertisement for whiteboards, where the guy says what this place needs is change, and everybody there gives him money change. So people then adopt what we call defense mechanisms to protect their egos from failure when they don't obtain their goals. So you might not pass the subject or do as well, and so the straightforward approach is that people then don't necessarily change their goals, or that what they may do is develop a defense mechanism to deal with the fact that they haven't changed their goals. And this is shown on the following slide. So these are important because these are important ways that consumers, and there are consumer behaviour that can occur by dealing with frustration. Now, this may not come from the marketer. It may come from the consumer's work environment. It may come from the consumer's family life or their personal life. And so there may be appeals which really do fit with the consumer's feeling of frustration. Okay, so there are types of systems of needs and therefore motivation, and psychologists, which a lot of this research is based on, have come up with some exhaustive lists of human needs and motives. Some of the things that are in common is that they start from fairly basic and then they become more sophisticated. Some of them have a hierarchy and some of them are just categories. So, for example, in 1938, Henry Murray, whose research is mentioned in the book, developed what we call a list of 28 psychogenic needs. And I won't go through all of them, but these also form the basis of what we call personality. Personality is how you react to things in the environment, which we'll look at, and personality and motivation really are interlinked. So here are some of the Murray's lists of psychogenic. So they're what we call cognitive needs. So inanimate objects, acquisition, retention, construction, ambition, human power. So ambition is yourself, human power is over. Sadomasochistic needs, so we're not talking about something a bit weird here, but basically people can be aggressive or they may seek to avoid conflict, abasement. Affection between people is seen as a very important goal here, and so is one of what we call social intercourse, leading to other things. But basically what we're saying here is that, what Murray is saying in particular, is that your mental goals, or what you're interested in, can be categorised into these various groups, and therefore which one is most important to you says something about your behaviour. And we'll have a look at that. Now, another very popular approach used a lot in social psychology, one that you're probably familiar with if you've been doing management and other subjects, is what we call Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And it's found by Abraham Maslow back in 1943. And he said, look, there are 5 levels of needs. And the five levels of needs start with what we call physiological, safety, love and belonging, esteem, and then finally self-actualization. And of course there is some overlap between these levels so that no need is ever completely satisfied, so that we can meet the need, for example, of food and shelter in a number of ways. And we seek to satisfy lower needs first. Now this is rather controversial. It's possible to avoid lower needs and satisfy higher levels of needs. For example, you may become a monk and meditate for 6 hours a day and forsake material needs in order to pursue self-actualization or spiritual needs. It's also suggested as lower-level needs become satisfied, higher-level needs emerge. And again, this is somewhat controversial, but it is a useful categorization of needs. Very nice video is shown here by economic psychology researchers about what motivates people and whether it is necessarily material rewards. And what they show is that motivational structure is not exactly consistent. Here's Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and you can see the arrow suggests that we move up the needs. So basically, you can see it starts here with the physiological needs. We then move up to safety, love and belonging, esteem, and finally self-actualization. Your text suggests that brands can position themselves as part of these needs. So Pepsi can position itself for physiological needs, Nokia in terms of social needs, along with esteem needs, Microsoft, self-actualization, Apple, and even Coca-Cola up here in the way that Coca-Cola has been linked to things like happiness, I'd like to buy the World Coke, or doing interesting things. So whenever you see a series of Coca-Cola advertisements, they're not really about physiological needs down here, they're more about self-actualization needs up here. So an evaluation, well, it's widely accepted, although it doesn't necessarily mean it's right. It's a very general approach, and there really has been no empirical research done on this approach. It's just a tool for understanding consumer motivations. It is a useful way for developing advertising appeals, and as we've seen earlier, in positioning various brands and products. So some of the applications then. Well, we can use it as a way of segmenting the market according to particular types of needs. Very nice advertisement here from Coca-Cola, people skydiving and drinking Coca-Cola, so that's really self-actualization. Or we can use it for positioning our product, for example, Volvo promoting the safety appeals of their products. I've got a couple of marketing examples on the next few slides of this. This is a Japanese advertisement for a digital phone from a few years ago, but you can see here that the motive of belongingness and love, that is, the product is used to communicate between the two lovers here, that then positions that product towards that need. Safety, if you're worried about your children's safety, or if you have a family, then products or services that are positioned well towards meeting those needs are also going to be considered highly. This is an advertisement for Volvo from a few years ago. This is a very nice advertisement recently for cycle helmets. Does your kid have a $100 feet and a $10 head? In other words, it's saying spend more money on a good cycle helmet because of the safety of your children. So we're trying to influence choice criteria here. Some other types of theories of motivation which are covered in your text. Obviously, I won't go through all of them, but you can see here that there are, if you like, some commonalities between all these approaches. We think of a mental approach, a thinking, emotional, physical, and a spiritual side to all types of theories of motivations covered in your text. Another way rather than looking at motives is to look at needs very simply, and you can see here this is similar to what we've looked at with some of these motivational structures of a trio of needs. And so you can see a power need to control the environment, achievement, ego needs and self-actualization, and finally an affiliation need for friendship and belonging. And of course, brands can be linked to these. So a power need, desire to control our environment, that could be a type of a new Apple iPhone. An achievement need, well, that could be buying a BMW. An affiliation need, that could be drinking a particular type of alcoholic beverage on a lovely island somewhere and being accepted by your friends. So brands and products can be quite easily linked to various types of approaches. How then do we measure? How do we know if people are motivated or not? Well, like a lot of things we do when we're studying consumers as individuals, we're often dealing with things we can't measure directly, or they're hypothetical. So it's very difficult for us to try and work out what kind of motive structure you have and where you fit. Also, remember, somewhat controversially, consumers may not be aware of motives or may be unwilling to disclose them, and we'll have a look at an example of that fairly soon. So measurement then is usually a combination of looking at consumers, observation, some self-report, and what we call projective techniques. These are discussed in market research, where we show somebody a picture or an object or somebody using an object and ask people to describe what's going on there. Okay, so motivational research, where does it come from? Well, it's very much linked back to Freud's theory of personality, which we'll look at in the next few weeks. It was popularised by a researcher called Ernst Stichter, who I met a few years ago at a consumer research conference, who adapted Freud's techniques. Now, Ernst believed very much in unconscious motives. Now, really, the motivational research relies on fairly in-depth interviews, small observation sizes, and of subjective interpretation. So it's hindered the validity, although Ernst Stichter, who I met, worked for companies such as Coca-Cola, General Electric, and General Motors with some of his research. We'll have a look at some of his findings later on. So qualitative approaches are usually used in these areas to delve into the consumer's unconsciousness. Here are some of the approaches that are typically used by trying to work out motivational theory. We might ask consumers to tell stories. We might ask them to construct an archetypal metaphor analysis. We might ask them to do word association, people who drink mid-strength beer are. We might draw a picture and ask them to, or present an advertisement and ask consumers to comment on that. Or we might actually ask them to draw pictures or sort pictures into what kinds of products might fit into power needs, self-actualization needs, affiliation needs, and so on. And so from that, we can work out their types of motivational structures. Again, these areas are covered in more detail in market research. Today's research is also influenced further by the science of semiotics, the study of the unconscious and subconscious meanings of non-verbal symbols to consumers, because these stimulus properties can also influence motivational outcomes. There is still evidence, although it's subjective, that unconscious mind represents the non-verbal symbols and forms. So the idea is that we respond firstly to images, and that drives emotional responses rather than written instructions. Some examples of physiological meanings are shown on the next slide. Now, what we have here is really research from Ernst Stichter and what he believes certain behaviours are ascribed to. And this is also covered in your textbook, but here's some of the approaches he suggested. Okay, so this is from Ernst Stichter's research, and really he is talking about now the subconscious motives. So you can see making, in this case, is really the act of giving birth. Ice cream, you can see it's pleasurable, emotive, it's a symbol of abundance. People prefer round packaging with an illustration that runs around the box because it suggests unlimited quantity. Power tools, Ernst Stichter believed, are a symbol of madness. They are to do with control over the environment. Beer is seen as an active, alive, sensuous beverage, feeling of security. So you can see here that there are what we might call a laddering of motives linked to both these types of products and services. As I said, it's somewhat controversial, but Ernst earned a lot of money from corporate clients in this area, and I've met motivational researchers in this area who are still doing quite well. Thank you very much. Now, another way is to look at an outcome, in this case goal-oriented, and to work back from the means-ends analysis what that actually means. So you can see here's a goal or motive of good health. For some of us, it's about learning about good health, therefore watching television. For others, it's mental health, books. For others, it's a good diet, apples or chicken. For others, it's relaxing, which might be red wine or a hot tub. These kinds of structures are important because people's motivational structure will differ. So a marketer can't assume that good health is all about a good diet or about cleanliness. And cleanliness is all about washing their hands. It might be about the purchase of a dishwasher. And so this often means ends analysis, or repertory grid is another name for it, is used extensively in market research to try and understand motivational structures. Also memory structures. Now, of course, there are ethics in consumer motivation which you should be aware of. We may be accused of creating needs. Do people really need to upgrade their car every year? Do they really need to buy disposable pods? Why can't they just use coffee grounds? Are we targeting vulnerable populations, children, teenagers and elderly, by demanding that the elderly stay young, or that children acquire things at a much faster pace, or that teenagers can have careers and exciting lives much faster than they used to? If we provide too many choices, consumers may feel consumed, unhappy, or even psychologically drained. And there's research which suggests that the more materialistic you are and the more choices that are provided to you doesn't necessarily make you a more happy person. Very aggressive advertising can increase the level of demand for products, but is detrimental. So, for example, there's a very nice example here from the Gruen transfer of how you sell beer, and some of the self-repertory examples that go on here. And you might also be concerned for things like the gambling and how that's linked, and whether driving motivation for that product is a good thing for society. So you can see there's a lot here, and really the text only brushes over some of the important aspects of motivation for you. But this is what we've covered today. We looked at the definition of motivation, and it's really goal-directed behaviour, which is really driven by striving. Often there's a feeling of tension. We looked at some of the models of the motivational processes and how these can be understood. We looked also discuss positive and negative motivation, so we can push people away from objects or towards outcomes. We looked at how consumers deal with frustration. This is important because not all consumers' goals in various areas may be obtained, and so that consumer behaviour can often occur not because a motive or need has been met, but because it hasn't been met. How do you arouse motives? Well, and we looked at some of the examples there, and this can be done through advertising, through consumers thinking about it, physiological and environmental factors. We looked at some models of needs and goals, and we found that they were there was a bit of overlap with theories of motivation. And we looked at some of the various motivational techniques which have developed over the last 30 or 40 years, and still a very important area of modern marketing research. And finally, we looked at some of the ethical research considerations, both in using this approach to study consumers and also to whether we should be using these, particularly an appeal to a consumer's subconscious, whether this is actually the right thing for us to do. So anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this lecture today. Read the chapter here and have a look at some of the notes. I've only really given you a very brief overview. Thanks for your time.